our meditation today of release. So I invite you now to take a deep breath. And when you feel comfortable, just gently close your eyes or maybe find a spot on the floor to gently gaze. Just allowing the chair to support you. Allowing your feet to root to the floor and to the earth. Feeling the energy of the earth move up through your feet and into your body. Just beginning to relax with each passing moment. Now I invite you to allow yourself just to imagine for a moment. Imagine what it feels to feel more calm. To feel more peace. And just to feel more focus. And now I invite you to allow your subconscious mind to just hold an image of what those things would feel like, truly feel like. Maybe imagine what you would see to have more of these in your life. Visualize what you might hear to have more calm and peace and focus. Perhaps you're already feeling these things. And if so, just allow yourself to go even deeper. And as we prepare to enter into our moment of silence, just allow your subconscious mind to reveal how you may have more of these things in your life. Allow your subconscious mind to allow you to feel already having more of these things in your life as we enter into the silence. as you begin to bring your awareness back to this room and back to this time and space, I invite you to take with you these feelings of calm into your life in the days and weeks ahead, long after you've left this space. Knowing that you always have within to go to bring more peace and calm into your life, to be the peace and calm that you already are. So I invite you now to take a deep breath and continue to bring your attention back to this room, back to the sounds and the sensations within. And you may open your eyes when you're ready. Namaste. Thank you, Pete. Things would just be so much easier if we always remembered who we were, wouldn't they? But I will say you all passed your first test this morning because apparently you all remembered the time change. Mindy and I checked, we double checked, we triple checked. We're like, okay, we have the right week, because it'd probably be really bad if I didn't show up. But so how's everybody feeling this morning? If it had been just a little bit warmer, I would have been tempted to move this thing outside, just to soak up some sun. All right, so this is our second Sunday as we move into our season of Lent. And last week, if you were here, you probably remember me mentioning the lion from The Wizard of Oz, who they call the Cowardly Lion, which I don't like that. Cowardly's just, inferring that he's just a coward, but in reality, he was more than that. He just had to remember who he was, right? But when I mentioned him last week, I talked about how he eventually found great courage along his journey. And my mind wanders back to all of the characters of The Wizard of Oz at this point, because the story actually, and I'm telling you, you can make a metaphysical interpretation of anything. Believe me, if you start studying it too much, you'll metaphysically interpret everything you read. But anyway, but I do like The Wizard of Oz because it does contain a really good underlying metaphysical story, if you really think about it. The characters are all seeking something that they want more of or want to exhibit more of. So they set out on this journey towards Oz to meet this supposed magical wizard that's to grant them each whatever it is that they're seeking. And I'm sure most everybody in here is familiar with the story. I don't have to break it all down for you. But they take the Yellow Brick Road, which is anything but a straight path to Oz, right? They're taking this road. They run into all these perils and these battles that need to be fought and overcome, yet they still just forge ahead, continuing their trip toward Oz. But once they do, however, they realize that the wizard is really nothing more than a fraud. He's nothing any different than they are. He's just this man behind the curtain, just with all these, smoke screens and all of this stuff going on. Eventually, they are able to all take a look back on their journeys and realize that it never was even really about the end point at all. It was about the journey along the way and what each of them gained and what each of them learned as they traveled on this journey. And B, they never needed a wizard or anything outside of themselves to obtain whatever it was that they were looking for, because they realized they all had these things within them all along. They just needed something to remind them of that. So I invite you to remember that as we continue to move through this season of Lent. Those things that you want more of in your life, or maybe want to exhibit more of in your life, they aren't waiting for you at the end of some arduous journey that's fraught with peril, where you have to travel some road. It may take you a journey to actually get to some of these things, but it doesn't mean that they aren't currently inside just waiting for you to remember. So I invite you to remember that as we continue through this season of Lent and even beyond. You've always got whatever it is you're looking for. You've always got it within you. So one of the first things I want to talk about today is insecurity. Now, insecurity is excellent in causing us to doubt ourselves and our abilities to accomplish what it is we want to accomplish, or those things that we want to change in our lives, isn't it? It comes knocking at the door at the most inopportune times. And it can sometimes feel really difficult to not measure ourselves up to others, can it? I think that probably happens to a lot of us. My house isn't as big as hers. She makes more money than I do. He's a better public speaker. He's got a better singing voice, which might really be true. But when we do this, it feeds into this false notion that we're deficient somehow, or that we somehow fail to measure up to others. Failure to measure up to others according to a standard that someone, which who knows who this someone is, set the bar for. Yet reality is that the thoughts we have, the thoughts that are going through our minds, sometimes on a constant basis, they provide these feelings of insufficiency. And those feelings of insufficiency, are they even real? Lots of times they only exist right up here, don't they? They don't even really exist outside of ourselves. It's this bar that someone else has set that we feel is causing us to somehow be deficient. Oftentimes we'll find that we are actually the ones judging ourselves the harshest. We're probably likely judging ourselves more internally than anybody outside of us is. So just what if? What if we were to make the decision to stop comparing ourselves to others? Can we just all make that agreement today to just say, listen, I'm going to stop comparing myself to other people? What maybe if instead we decide to use other people as a learning opportunity? Something that we might, for instance, instead of saying, you know, he's a better public speaker than I am, what if we were to change it around and say, hey, you know what? I like his style. I like the way he makes eye contact with people when he speaks, and I might try a little bit of that. Can you see the difference? Or what if we just simply instead decided to affirm, I am enough. I don't have to be like her or him to be enough. I am enough. Now, in order to do this, it does take a willingness, right? We have to be willing to want to do this. We have to be willing to want to proclaim I am enough. A willingness to make the conscious decision to become aware of and to stop any negative self-talk the moment it arises. When we do, we're better able to fast from insecurity and to be able to move forward with more confidence in our lives, with the confidence that we already are. And instead of comparing ourselves to those we feel have been successful before us, we can instead maybe stop to think again what we might learn from them. As our book states, assured of God's presence within, I have all the resources I need to succeed. I move confidently forward. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about distraction and how we can fast from distraction, allowing ourselves to be able to just fully soak in and be present in each and every moment. So in the book, some weird minister by the name of Reverend Evin, I don't know who that is, but I talk about my relocation back to Texas. Now, Mindy and I, we had initially moved, and some of you probably already know this, but we had initially moved to Oregon the first time in 2012. And we'd been living in Oregon and just really enjoying it. And probably about a couple of years after we had been there, my mother-in-law, Shirley, began to experience falls. She began to fall a lot. And one of them was serious enough to almost put her in the hospital. So Mindy and I at that point kind of started growing a little concerned, especially of being so far away from her at that point. So we finally talked about it, and we figured it would just be best for us to relocate back to Texas so we could be closer to her and assist her as she needed it. But we always promised ourselves, we said, when the time is right, however, we're going to return back to Oregon. So we physically made the move. And I say physically because emotionally at that time we never did. Y'all know where I'm going with this. But through all of the blessings and joys of me getting to know Shirley better and to really love her, before she transitioned, through the purchase of our first house together, through the amazing friends that we met in Dallas, we were emotionally absent for almost all of that because we were constantly living in some future time of when we would return to Oregon. We'd complain about Texas. We'd complain, it's too hot, which if you've been to Texas, you really understand that it can get very hot there. But, and this is something I've heard of that's going to happen around here, but we'd say the mosquitoes are all over me. But we always, no matter what it was, we found something to complain about consistently, something about Texas and about being there in that moment. And as I mentioned in the book, the distraction of looking to the future prevented us from fully immersing ourselves in the present moment and enjoying what was right in front of us. So if I allow it to do so, distraction can really pull me away from the present moment. And it can prevent me from enjoying some of life's most cherished moments to their fullest. So when I catch myself doing this, I pause and I breathe. And I return my awareness to the here and to the now, where my life is currently happening. My life at that time wasn't happening in Oregon. It was happening right there in Texas. Because what are some of the things that we can allow to happen when we allow ourselves to be present? What are some of the wonderful things that can happen? What's just one word? Anybody have one word of something that happens when we can be fully present? Joy, love, peace, connection. We miss those things when we are living in some other moment other than what we have, the present moment. What else can happen when we live in a whirlwind of distraction? We can also begin to live in a state of anxiety or a state of fear when we allow ourselves to become distracted. We do this because we can become too caught up in what may or may not happen at some future time. We can sometimes think about the past too, but that's over. We can't change that. The only thing we can do with things that happened in the past was to know that we learned from them and we did the best we could do at the time. So then we become fixated on the future, and that's when those feelings such as fear and anxiety can seep in. Now, during ministerial school, there comes a time when you're in school to where you actually have to apply to the ordination path. Acceptance into the school alone doesn't say, hey, you're going to be a unity minister. There are all these interviews you have to go through, all of these face-to-face interview panels, packets that are, I can't even tell you how thick you have to fill out. Background checks you've got to go through, references being questioned, and there's just this whole other mix going on behind the scenes. And looking back on that, I noticed how I let my worry of possibly not being accepted distract me from some of the present moments along the way. There would be moments where I'd be with my fellow ministerial students at the village, and we'd be sitting around chatting, having a good time, and then somebody would say, what if we don't get accepted? And then we would all start talking about that and worrying about oh no, what am I going to do? Will I still feel comfortable walking into a unity church? People are going to know. All this stuff. All these worries would go through. And this was a group of ministerial students. We knew better. But we'd talk about the disappointment we might feel or what other thing we were going to do. And that distraction sometimes it robbed us of the joy of being together and just being able to enjoy each other's company. And it turns out that every single one of us that was in my little group was accepted. All that time we spent in distraction was for naught. We were all accepted. So how can we fast from distraction, though? How can we fast from that and decide and make the decision to be fully present in the moment? Well, first, it's just about like everything else that doesn't serve our highest good. We have to become aware. And in order to become aware, we have to be willing. Oftentimes you'll hear me ask, are you willing? Because you have to first be willing. A willingness to say to yourself, I am present. I am right here. I am right now. When we're willing, we're ready to move into that next phase, which happens to be awareness. We have to be aware that our thoughts are wandering. We have to catch them in that moment. That we have to be aware that maybe we're starting to grow anxious or that our thoughts are wandering from the present moment. What's something that's always talked about in meditation? It's okay if the mind wanders, be gentle with yourself, but gently pull your focus back to your mantra or to your breath. It's because it pulls us back into that present moment. In fact, that practice and awareness itself can often even keep you in the present moment because you become more conscious about what it is you're saying and what you're doing at any given time. And there are a few ways you can do this. As much as I so badly want to take a break from technology for a bit, I find that it often does help keep us in the present moment. There's those apps that you can now get that you set it for so often and it'll make it like a little dinging sound and it brings your awareness back to the present moment. I've tried it and sometimes it'll help zap me back into the present moment. I remember when I was working in corporate, I'd be at my desk and I was surprised at how much my mind wandered during my work. It would be out here thinking about, when I go to this meeting, when I go to that meeting, when I finish this project, and then I'd hear that little ding on my phone. I was like, oh, okay, I'm working. I'm not at that moment yet. But on the flip side, sometimes it's even taken a break from technology, right? And I'm sure most of us have decided, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to check just one little thing. I'm going to look and see what the weather's going to be. Or, hey, that actress, I think she's made her transition. When did that happen? You pick up your phone just to kind of see what's going on, only to find that one search led to another. And before you realize it, so much time has passed. You're like, okay, where did the time go? And what was the original reason I even picked up my phone for? And please tell me I'm not the only one that does this. Some other brave soul, raise your hand, please. Okay, thank you. Okay. But sometimes it's good to just put everything away. Just turn it off and put it away. Take a walk outside. Tell yourself you're going to look for a certain kind of animal, a certain type of tree, or a certain type of flower. Savor each breath along the way, the rise and fall of each foot. Those things can help bring you and keep your awareness in the present moment. Take a moment to just be with your children or your grandchildren. I remember a couple of months back, Mindy and I went to a local restaurant and there was a table next to us and I see what I assume was a mother and daughter sitting there having lunch, and the daughter's just talking and the mother's eating with one hand and she's scrolling the phone with the other. And that poor little girl was just sitting there ignored, and I was really sad. After a while, she just stopped talking and her little face fell and she just sat there silently. All that time, the mother was just missing hearing what her child had to say. Excuse me. Distraction can rob us of the present moment if we aren't careful and if we aren't aware. But it's up to us to have a willingness to practice an awareness and to gently pull ourselves back to the present moment when we find that we're wandering away from it. As I mentioned in the book, being fully present allows us to experience moments of contentment while opening our hearts and minds to the beauty that surrounds us right here and right now in this present moment. So, and finally, I'd like to talk a bit about what I personally feel plagues far too many of us. There is almost nothing that can make us feel more isolated than loneliness, right? We are all here. We all have this innate need within to belong to a community. And that extends as far back as our first biblical parable of Adam and Eve, right? According to the story, God creates Adam and he notices, he's like, well, this guy's just walking around alone. I mean, he's talking to the plants and he's talking to the animals. But there's not that other type of connection. So Eve enters into the picture and, it's a parable, remember, but this external God looks down and says, hey, there's connection going on now. There's two people here. Now, my undergraduate degree is in criminal justice. It's in criminal justice. Well, I mean, I've got like a long list of cops in my family, so that was the path I was going to take. I was like, I'm going to be a cop, but what they do for that kind of money, I was like, never mind. But anyway. But I remember studying the history and evolution of prisons back in some of my earlier criminal justice classes, and I remember them talking about one specific prison, and it was called the Walnut Street Prison. And it was a prison run by the Quakers in Philadelphia. And they used to house people there from like the late 1700s into about the mid or so 1800s. And they believed at that time, and remember this was part of the time too, but they believed at that time that isolation and salvation were the cure to those who committed crimes. So they isolated each of the people that were housed there 24/7. And they would place them in individual cells alone with nothing but a Bible. Yeah. But it drove almost every person that was housed there to insanity, or at least to the brink of insanity. And it was eventually found that what they were doing was just not a good solution, which is partially why the doors closed, I think in like 1838 or something like that. But the people that were housed there, they lacked any kind of community. Even with myself, as I'm sure many of you probably can attest as well, there are times I'm invited to meet a friend out and the time starts getting closer and I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to go. I think I just want to kind of stay home and just kind of isolate myself. Yet I go and I find that I'm happy that I did. I find that I enjoyed that community, that just being with another individual. We all have this need to both give and receive love and so much more, yet we don't do that when we're locked away in isolation, do we? We can't share our gifts with other people when we're locked away in isolation. And I mean, there are times when we do need a bit, especially if you're like one of me, you're an introvert, and that's kind of how you refuel yourself. We kind of have to go off by ourselves for a little bit. But we didn't come here to live like that 24/7. We came here to share the wonderful gifts that we both have and are. And without community to do that, we can begin to feel lost, maybe a little depressed or a little restless. We came here to be and to share love. And if we're not out and about, sometimes with a sense of community, we're unable to do that. As Reverend Jean Marie mentions in our book, as I feast on my connection with others, I remember that we are all one, and that each person is an expression of God. In spiritual community together, we prayerfully commune with the love of God, and I can feel my connection with all life. I reach out to others with a generosity of spirit, experiencing greater harmony, peace, and understanding in all my relationships. So the one thing all of the things we talked about today have in common is really a willingness. To have that willingness and then to have that awareness. It's like making the decision to fast from sugary foods so that we may start to instead feast on whole healthy foods. And that's after I have my red velvet cupcake D. But it comes with a willingness to change. The change to live a healthier lifestyle, right? Then comes an awareness. An awareness of, okay, I'm reaching for a sugary treat and I'm about to eat it. Once you have that awareness, you can ask yourself if it's something you really need. Something that meets the new, healthier goal that you have set for yourself, right? It's also realizing that God or the divine energy source within yourself. Now, our book quotes the late, great Unity minister, Reverend Eric Butterworth. Dwell for a while on the idea of the universe as the allness that we call God, realizing that everything within it, from the vast galaxies to the subatomic particles, is created in and of the universe. You may wonder about the vastness of the universe and peer at it through a telescope. However, you are not on the outside looking in. You are on the inside looking out. You are the universe at the point where you are. So there is no limit as to what we or you can do, not in God consciousness, not in Christ consciousness or the divine consciousness. The only limit doesn't even really exist. And why is that? It's because it's manufactured, often right up inside of here. Reverend Eric Butterworth also stated, wherever we are along the way, no matter the problems or challenges, there is always more in us. The Christ in us as our hope of glory which means our potential for healing, overcoming, prospering, and succeeding. There is no limit. I invite everybody to say that with me. There is no limit. So today I choose to fast. I fast from insecurity. I choose to fast from distraction. And I choose to fast from loneliness. Today I feast. I choose to feast on confidence. I choose to feast on being fully present. And I feast on connection. Today, I know that I am the center of the universe. I know that I am the center of God, and so are all of you. Namaste. And really quickly, right before I have Pat back up, I just wanted to make an announcement.